Welcome to GBA2, Directing Benefit Programs Part 2. This is Module 2, Rating and Premium Setting. To me, this is one of the most exciting assignments in the program because it brings the reality of rating and premium setting to a fresh perspective. Underwriting and rate mating is so important, but I think one of the key things is, and I use this as a preamble to the material, that one has to understand that the rate that you get on a fully insured plan is one thing, but what is the premium for a self-funded plan? That's often set by the carrier and what they want to charge the individuals, and you got to be very careful here. I know many companies offer two plans. One might be a fully insured HMO, where the risk is on the insurance company to run an efficient program, and if they are successful in that, they actually make a profit on the deal. And the other is a PPO, and many of the PPOs, on the contrary to being fully insured, would be self-funded by the employer, where the employer takes on the risk, but with the law of large numbers, they feel, that this is pretty cool. If we have a large homogeneous group, we'll go over that, and we can have a lot of predictability. But here's the caution. If all the healthy families go to the HMO, guess who gets the profit? The insurance company. That also means the PPO is saddled with some of the people not as healthy, but want the robustness and the flexibility of a PPO. And if that's self-funded, who takes it on the chin? Yeah, it could be the employer. And then you might say, well, they might have reinsurance and people backing it up. Yeah, but then where goes the reinsurance rate? So we got to be very careful. I tell employers when you're offering these two type of programs, and it might be if you're going to subsidize a plan, you be very careful in how you skew it, because if all the healthiest go to the HMO and that's not a self-funded program, what's going to happen to your PPO if it's self-funded? So there's a lot of important things, and I highlight this in the notes, saying that there's a lot of importance on this concept because healthy families may gravitate to the HMO, saying, you know what, I don't care if my doctor that I want to see is in or not, because I'm probably not going to see him because I'm healthy, other than a wellness check. So there are some very important considerations to do that. In this assignment, you notice I embedded a couple of really key slides in the outline. Take a peek at them. I hope that enhances the reading that you have. Let's go into some of those objectives. Objective 1 begins, with the mathematical formula. What is a pure premium? And I tell you, this is the only mathematical formula really that you're going to see in all of the 13 modules of this program. So don't get, oh, wow, I've got to learn math. No. But basically, gross premiums equal to, in essence, the pure premium divided by 1 minus the loading percentage. It's a simple concept there, but what we often have is a lot of people say, oh, there's math involved. Not really. I mean, I'll expand on it, and then we have another formula that's a spin-off of this, and that's it. So it's not as overwhelming as it could be. Take that from a guy who used to take actuarial exams. But the pure premium, we call that the actuarial fair premium. It's based on the expected claims. And what is expected claims? It's the probability of loss times the magnitude of the loss. So that's where we come up with the whole pure premium concept. Now there's loads. We'll talk about loads extensively in the program, but first of all, if it is an insured program, I just want you to be aware that there's a premium tax built into the premium. Like when you buy a life insurance policy, 2% approximately is going to tax. So like when I go to the gas pump, like 39 cents is going to tax. Well, it's not as bad with health insurance or any health insurance products, but there's a premium tax. For example, in our business, that goes when you see a fully insured plan, a fully insured plan. Self-funded plans, obviously, don't have a premium, so there's no premium tax. Actually, that's one of the reasons people like self-funded plans. Right there off the bat, there's a savings. But a loading percentage in general on a fully insured plan is what the insurer applies to cover its objective risk. Let me pause there. What is an objective risk? Just as an aside, an objective risk is basically, if you want to look at this, the numerator is like the expected or actual loss divided by the number of possible losses. That's our objective risk. And we want to be very careful on the objective risk because it can vary by a company's geographical area where their participants live and the competition issues in an area. The costs of running a plan, though, are part of the loading percentage. And we got, there's marketing, adjudicating is settling of the claims cost, processing the claims, the coordination of the benefits, reviewing, some of the administration things, providing access to the network. So you have a lot of loading issues to be sensitive to that have nothing to do with the actual reimbursement of the providers. That's a load. So that's one of the factors that we got to be sensitive to is the loading percentage. So that's one thing that is, when we talk about loads, how much can it be? Now, historically, before ACA, the loads could be quite high. There were maybe 10-15% of group plans. The larger the group, usually the smaller the load, the economies of scale in the individual market. But before ACA, some of these loads were way beyond where you see it now, way beyond 20% and could be as high as 50%. ACA said, no, we're going to come up with the medical loss ratio concept, the MLR. And it said, okay, you got to submit insurance companies in fully insured plans. You got to submit some documentation. We want to know what's going to real services, and they really tightened the belt on what can be considered a load versus service. In fact, basically for the large groups, they said, if your loads are going to be more than 15% of charges, now smaller groups, 20% of charges, you're not running too efficiently, and you're going to have to offer a rebate of the surcharge back to the consumer. So the Affordable Care Act came up with the concept of medical loss ratio, requiring, in essence, a rebate to the employees if the percentage did not meet the minimum standards that are out there. So it really tightened the limits on health insurance rate increases, in fact, the rates in and of itself. So many insurance companies have to be very guarded on how they spend the consumer premium dollars on administration costs, profits, salaries, overhead, and marketing, and see to it that 85% in general for the groups, 80% for basically the smaller sized groups are designing a plan that actually gets services to the consumer and not to profit margins and excessive expenses. So that we got to be very careful too. Now, I gave you in the reading a lot of enrichment thoughts on the loads. This is one of the key things with ACA to minimize the surplus and bring more efficiency. If we're going to have call it a middleman, the insurance company involved here as a player, we want to be sure that they get their fair share. Yeah, they're up to it, but that money that goes into premium at approximately 85% or more goes to the consumer. Goes to the providers for the consumer to actual care for the services. So that's a key thing. Now, if the carrier, we want to be very sensitive here, and I remind employers, one of the other considerations is the insurance company actually, especially if they're getting the money in advance, they were getting interest interest growth on the money, which helps them set the premiums. But with interest rates all over the place, some years, if you remember, interest rates were very low, especially in 2021, early 2022. That's a concern. But insurance companies, when they had to price a product, had to take a lot of things into considerations. But when it was low, they couldn't count on that profit margin as much. So that's a sensitivity on loads and rates that for insurance companies, when they got to set it, they have to take into account what do they think they're going to get on the interest rate of premiums that are paid in advance. So that's kind of some of the things that are out there in terms of plan design. I just encourage people to look at that and on what's going on. And that really is Learning Objective 1. A little overview of Learning Objective 2 is first of all, just as an aside, sometimes we have carve-outs. And carve-outs is a very simple concept. The core medical services, some entities say, let's carve it out, like prescription drug, very common carve-out, because there might be a more efficient way to run the prescription plan than through the medical plan. Yes, it'll, total max out-of-pockets will be coordinated with a good computer system, but it may be more efficient to carve out the prescription drug and even the behavioral health program. Now, they might carve it out to another division of the carrier, and sometimes might carve it out altogether to a different, to a vendor. So you see some of this with, especially on prescription drugs, with the CareMarts and the Express Scripts, and then you also see some of the prescription plans that are basically a subsidiary of the carrier. But that that's where we get the whole carve-out concept. It really works for efficiency on administration in many cases, just have that special focus. But that's a carve-out. And in underwriting, we just want to be aware that that is done, and often is done in the name of efficiency. Okay, I braced you. The second key word that we want to be sensitive to is the expansion of what we covered a few moments ago, is what is objective risk. Now, I mentioned earlier, it's the expected or actual loss divided by the number of possible loss. We have a mathematical formula, and textbooks vary on this. You see the formula in your notes, very similar to what's in the textbook assigned in this reading, but don't get carried away when you see that the U and square root. Basically, it could get worse. Some textbooks use special symbols in the industry documentation, but the concept's essentially the same. The objective risk is the relative variation between claims, the actual claims experienced, and the claims that were expected. So that is the objective risk, the variance. When an insurance company enters a market, sometimes they say, maybe not. Or they might say, I will leave the market because I am uncertain, because I can't call this market a predictable market. So we might be better to pass. You see a lot of this with the health exchanges. When the health exchanges started in the early years of ACA, you would see many carriers just wanting to be on the list and the panel so people could pick them as one of the options that are available to them on the exchanges. Fast forward 20 plus years after ACA, all of a sudden a lot of carriers said, let me pass. Too unpredictable. I'm going to be out of that business. I'm not going to offer my offerings on the public marketplace exchanges. Those are the ones that, when people don't have a group plan, they hop on and pick, a bronze, silver, or gold plan. And what happened in many areas, and even the bigger cities, you might only have one carrier, maybe with 2 or 3 variations, and that's it. Not like the good old days when ACA first came out. So that's a consideration that we want to be sensitive to. So what's happened in the marketplace? And a lot of carriers, because of the variation, even though they may say they have the law of large numbers, they're facing the reality. ACA eliminated caps. Prior to ACA, there was like $1 million cap on some network claims, and people went beyond that. There just was no coverage. Now you don't have that ceiling, so you have it. Now it's interesting. The objective risk is lower, actually. If you think of it, it's counterintuitive. But the larger the expected losses, all things being equal, the smaller is the objective risk. The reading in the text is possible. Suppose the possible loss can range from $0 to $10,000. If the expected loss is $1,000, the risk is relatively large. On the other hand, if the expected loss is $8,000, the real risk there, is much smaller. So that's kind of brings the whole concept to light. I hope it does. I put in the reading for you just to summarize it because it's like, oh gosh, objective risk will decline as the number of lives goes up. Why? We have the law of large numbers. You take a coin, you flip it 1,000 times, statistically it'll be 50-50, 500 heads, 500 tails. But if I flipped it only 10 times, we lose the predictability because of the small sample. That's it of the actuarial thing. And I know there's a lot of grasping in there. So relax. Actuary 101 is now over, but that is something to kind of get a handle on and reread some of the readings there on the concept. As an aside, and it is in the readings, we talk about subjective risk. Very simply, subjective risk is found when we look at the individual's degree of risk aversion. Admittedly, those with the greater risk of risk aversion are more likely to purchase insurance coverage with a higher premium, but with a lower consumer cost at the time of service. I'm guilty of that too. Many years ago, I gravitated to a low deductible, low copay, low co-insurance plan for my family. And I had the 4 kids, partly because I did not want to spend after-tax dollars for health care. And at the time, the FSA cap was low.